Hello MotoGP enthusiasts. Welcome back to ZNGP Today. Marc Márquez's run without a MotoGP victory has stretched to 9 Grands Prix on the calendar since his last win at Misano last year, marking his third longest drought in the Premier class. The combination of a lingering right shoulder injury, setup challenges with Ducati's 2026 package, and the current dominance of rivals such as Marco Bezzecchi has left the reigning champion searching for answers as the championship moves to Europe. Davide Tardozzi argues that Pirelli's Superbike work is already shaping the tyre profile for MotoGP's 2027 era. He sees recent WorldSBK gains as evidence that Pirelli understands the demands of premier-class racing and wants teams to prepare for tyres that will be stressed differently by the incoming 850cc rules. Max Bartolini outlines Yamaha's internal reorganization and technical priorities as the factory races to close the gap before the 2027. He flags cultural and process frictions between Giro d'Lesmo and Japan, stresses the need to align testing with the incoming Pirelli era, and frames current development as a bridge to the 850cc future. Jack Miller's blunt description of Yamaha's V4 straight-line woes crystallizes the factory's current pain, a project still maturing, clear deficits in top speed and acceleration, and an urgent need to translate winter data into tangible on-track gains. Miller's candor frames a development story that is technical, organizational, and human all at once. Don't forget to click subscribe button and the bell icon for MotoGP news update. Marquez's current winless spell is notable not only for its length but for how it compares with previous low points in his career. He has endured longer droughts, most dramatically the 53-race dry spell between 2021 and 2024. But since his MotoGP debut he rarely went more than 6 races without a victory before the 2020 injury era. The right shoulder damage sustained after the Mandalika crash has not fully healed, and Marquez continues to manage its consequences. Missed races last season and a cautious start to this year have limited his track time and race rhythm, complicating both confidence and outright pace. Ducati's 2026 package has shown flashes but also inconsistencies. Setup choices and tire degradation have undermined race results even when single lap speed looked competitive. At Austin, for example, tire wear contributed to a drop in position despite earlier promise. Meanwhile, rivals, notably Bezzecchi and Aprilia, have produced relentless long race pace. When a rider is recovering physically, the margin for setup error shrinks. Small compromises that a fully fit rider could mask become race-ending issues. The Spanish Grand Prix offers Marquez both a home court opportunity and a difficult circuit historically. Jerez's technical layout will test shoulder strength, braking stability, and tire management, all areas where Marquez and Ducati need gains. The race also presents the chance to reach a symbolic milestone. Marquez sits on 99 career wins and will be chasing his 100th. Home races can lift a rider, but they also raise expectations. A measured approach that prioritizes race rhythm over headline results may be the smarter short-term plan. Ducati must balance short-term fixes to improve race day stability with longer-term development work. That means refining setups to protect tires, tailoring feedback loops to Marquez's current physical limits, and avoiding rushed aerodynamic or chassis changes that could exacerbate inconsistency. For Marquez, the focus is on progressive rehabilitation, rebuilding race fitness, and regaining the confidence to push at the limit. The most successful mid-season recoveries combine honest diagnosis, incremental technical gains, and a rider program that restores both body and belief. Marquez's 9-race winless run is a significant storyline but not an irreversible one. His history proves he can rebound from extended slumps, yet the path back requires coordinated work, targeted medical recovery, setup stability from Ducati, and tactical race management to protect tires and confidence. Jerez will be an early indicator of whether the number 93 can end the drought and chase that elusive 100th victory, or whether the season will continue to favor the current wave of rivals. Tardozzi links the lap time improvements in WorldSBK to Pirelli's development trajectory for MotoGP. He believes the supplier has used Superbike races to validate compounds and constructions that better resist late race drop-off. I'm sure the progress seen in the last year and a half in Superbike is related to the work Pirelli is doing for MotoGP. Using a parallel championship as a development platform lets a tire maker accelerate learning under race conditions before a major supplier switch. The core change Tardozzi highlights is reduced performance loss over race distance. Where Pirelli once faded late, recent races show stronger consistency, a trait that will reshape race strategies and setup choices in MotoGP. Despite smaller displacement, the 850cc era promises lighter, more powerful machines that will load tires differently. Tardozzi warns that MotoGP tires will face greater thermal and mechanical stress than Superbikes, and Pirelli is reportedly preparing for that reality. Even though the displacement is decreasing, the bikes will have more power and less weight, so they will put the tires under greater stress. Lower mass and higher cornering loads change the tire's operating window. Suppliers must balance grip, durability, and predictable degradation. Tardozzi points to concrete examples, riders shaving large chunks off previous lap times, and attributes much of that gain to tire evolution rather than purely to chassis or rider improvements. He uses Toprak Razgatlioglu's and Nicolo Bialega's pace as illustrative. This isn't due to the bike or the rider, but to the tires. When tire advances produce measurable lap time gains, manufacturers must reassess aero, suspension, and electronics to exploit the new envelope. Teams must factor Pirelli's trajectory into both short-term setup work and long-term 850 cubic centimeters programs. That means early testing with Pirelli-like compounds, tighter integration between tire engineers and chassis teams, and scenario planning for different degradation profiles. Ducati's current struggles underline how tire behavior can amplify or mask package weaknesses. Anticipatory testing and cross-discipline feedback loops will be decisive as teams adapt to a supplier change and new technical regulations. Tardozzi's read is pragmatic. Pirelli appears to be aligning its Superbike learnings with MotoGP needs, and the 850 cubic centimeters transition will demand tires that tolerate higher stresses. If Pirelli's development holds, teams that proactively adapt setups and testing programs will gain an early advantage. Those that treat the supplier change as a minor variable risk being surprised when race distance behavior diverges from expectations. Bartolini identifies coordination between Yamaha's European sporting base and its Japanese engineering heart as a structural weakness. Differences in working styles and dispersed decision-making slow iteration and dilute focus. He argues Yamaha must evolve from a dual-centered operation into a more integrated global organization to accelerate development. It's difficult when departments work on opposite sides of the world. We still have room for improvement there. Organizational alignment is as important as technical direction. Resolving cultural and process gaps can shorten development cycles and improve on-track responsiveness. Yamaha's V4 program is the technical cornerstone for the 2027 regulations, but it has introduced short-term pain. Bartolini accepts the need to keep evolving the current bike while simultaneously preparing the 850cc platform, arguing that some developments for 2026 will carry over and inform next year's baseline. Some developments we're making now for the current bike will be useful for next year's. With Pirelli replacing Michelin in 2027, Bartolini stresses the logic of aligning test programs to the new supplier. He warns against spending limited track time validating parts on Michelin if the race season will use Pirelli, and calls for targeted tests that yield transferable data for the 850cc era. With the upcoming tire change, it doesn't make much sense to test many parts with Michelin if we then have to work with Pirelli. Yamaha continues to rely on experienced test riders such as Augusto Fernandez and Andrea Dovizioso, and keeps some durability work in Japan. Bartolini questions the late-season value of wildcards, suggesting they are most useful for major component trials, chassis, swing arm, cooling, rather than incremental tweaks. He advocates for a disciplined testing calendar that prioritizes high-value experiments. Bartolini frames Yamaha's path as a medium-term rebuild, optimize cross-continental processes, focus testing on Pirelli-relevant data, and extract transferable learnings from the current bike to accelerate the 850cc program. He emphasizes that organizational change and technical clarity must proceed in parallel to restore competitiveness. Bartolini's assessment is pragmatic. Yamaha must fix internal coordination while making smart, supplier-aware technical choices to bridge to 2027. If the factory can streamline decision-making between Giorno di Lesmo and Japan, prioritize Pirelli-aligned testing, and focus on developments that transfer to the 850cc platform, it can shorten the recovery curve. If organizational frictions persist and testing remains unfocused, Yamaha risks entering the new regulations behind better-prepared rivals. Miller's metaphor, a lamb to the slaughter, captures the visceral experience of losing speed down the straights and being exposed to rivals' acceleration. It's not just lap time, it's the psychological toll of repeatedly being overtaken where the bike should be strongest. When you try to open the throttle on the straight, you feel a bit like a lamb to the slaughter. Rider language often signals deeper technical frustration. When a factory rider resorts to such imagery, engineers take notice. Austin underlined Yamaha's weakness. All four Yamahas were off the pace on the straights, unable to match rivals' top speed. That deficit affects qualifying, race positioning, and the ability to defend or attack, compounding problems across a race weekend. Straight-line performance is a multiplier. Losing time on the run to the line forces riskier moves elsewhere and magnifies tyre and setup trade-offs. Yamaha is processing a heavy stream of winter and race data in Japan while trying to iterate on chassis, swing arm, and engine maps. Miller stresses the workload. 4 bikes producing feedback leaves little breathing room, and the team must prioritize which changes will yield the biggest gains. All the data and rider feedback comes in, and you really have to understand what's needed to improve. Rapid data cycles are valuable only if they feed clear, prioritized action items. Otherwise, development becomes noise. The immediate roadmap focuses on incremental gains ahead of Jerez, engine responsiveness, aerodynamic tweaks, and chassis adjustments to recover top-end speed and race stability. Miller remains cautiously optimistic, viewing Jerez as a chance to narrow the gap if targeted fixes land. Early European rounds often reward quick, focused upgrades. A small, well-timed improvement can restore competitiveness and rider confidence. The V4 remains a long-term bet tied to the 850cc transition, but short-term competitiveness matters for rider morale and development momentum. Yamaha must balance urgent performance patches with the broader architecture changes required for 2027, ensuring that fixes now don't compromise the future platform. The most successful transitions marry short-term stabilization with long-term architecture validation. Misalignment risks losing both seasons. Miller's stark comment is a wake-up call rather than a resignation. Yamaha's V4 program is still in its infancy and needs rapid, disciplined iteration to close the straight-line gap. If engineers convert the avalanche of feedback into a few high-value changes before Jerez, the team can arrest the slide and rebuild confidence. If not, the season may become a prolonged development window that tests rider patience and the factory's ability to prioritize. Thanks for watching ZNGP Today, and this is your MotoGP news update. And see you next time!